We'll see how this goes. All right, Dr. Patti. Dr. Patti, nice to meet you. I'm Greg.
Nice to meet you, Greg. How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. How was your day so far? You doing all right?
Doing good. Hanging in there with the end of the semester.
Yeah.
Like you know, busy and just kind of.
I'm sure it's a lot more busy for you too, because you gotta grade all those things that we do for the teachers and professors. Right?
Yeah. No, I don't know, but you got 5 classes, and you know we all have life going on.
But so Word on the Street was that you were a rock and roll legend back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So would you like to explain some of that for me? I just want to touch base on that a little bit.
Sure. So a minor rock and roll star. I was, from Southern California, which is the land of rock and roll, and everybody's in a band there, so it doesn't mean much to say that you're in a band, but that was the big lifelong goal. Started in high school, started playing shows, about 16, 17 we were playing shows, and then went to college. It was kind of, bands were evolving, like a couple of the guys stayed through with all the bands, but went from a ska band to a punk band to like a pop rock funk band, and that's the one that was nice. Got kind of big, and
stuck it through, did you?
Yep, and just kept playing shows all over Southern California. Did a couple tours of California, north and south, and played a bunch of campuses and stuff. I think we had a UC Davis shows that had a few thousand people there, and we were selling out, House of Blues in Los Angeles, and playing down at a place called the Coach House in San Juan Capistrano, which was probably our favorite club to play. But as you probably know, bands, it's as much marketing as it is, and I just wanted to write music and play songs and play at our own pace, so didn't really dig the marketing aspect of it. So just kind of played and did our thing, and then in 2006, you asked me for the timeline. So 2006 is when we played. We were in a battle of the bands. It was put on by Sony and Best Buy, and you went through multiple. The first stage of the competition was actually bands playing at Best Buy stores. So we there was 4 bands that would play at stores, and then you make it into the quarterfinals and semifinals, and then the semifinals and the finals. The semis were at the House of Blues in Los Angeles, and there was 10 bands, and the top 2 made it to the finals, and there was a panel of judges. One of the judges was what's that band? I forget what band he was in. It was a 90s band, and so we rocked that and won the semifinals, and then the finals was at a place called the Roosevelt Hotel, right in LA, famous hotel. What's that guy, skinny drummer dude from Tommy Lee?
Tommy Lee.
Yeah, he was there.
Jeez.
Daniel Tosh was the act. So the first band went, and then Daniel Tosh did a set, and then we went, and it was us versus this death metal band, and they were just such a bummer, and they half the band was playing with a track, and we so they started playing, and they were just singing, not even singing, just
exactly.
And then we get up there and we're interpersonal about it, getting the crowd involved, doing synchronized moves and shredding, and so we won dominantly, and then that was supposed to result in it did result in recording time at a famous studio in LA called the Chop Shop, and then we were supposed to get albums released at all Best Buy stores. And we hated the recording that they did at the Chop Shop. We sounded like Nickelback. And actually it was the place where Nickelback recorded, so no joke.
Sure, that's why.
It sounded like the worst pop schlock I had ever heard. And so we re-recorded it ourselves, and by that time the person who put on the competition at Best Buy had got fired, so they just forgot about us in the fray. So it's one of those almost famous stories. But as that was all kind of coming to an end, the teaching, at that time I was in my master's program, I was teaching, and that just very early on as an academic, people talk about how difficult and competitive academia is.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it was a lot friendlier than the music scene. And like, you could be as good a musician as you want to be, and that doesn't mean you're going to make it. And with academia, and teaching, I immediately was being rewarded. It's like, oh, you're a really good teacher, and you wrote an award-winning conference paper thing. And it was like, those doors were opening very wide, and I enjoyed it. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So, okay, so you're in about your 20s or so when you were going through that rock and roll stage.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you could tell yourself back then, from now, what would you tell yourself now?
If I could talk to myself back then, I think I would just want to hang out with me at that time. It was good times.
Yeah.
It was I think maybe just, don't, I was in the moment and like doing the mindfulness stuff, and but I think I would just let myself know, like, be confident just being who you are, and just continue to do what you love, and don't stress. I think even though I was loving what I was doing, there's always that uncertainty of fear. The fear of what am I gonna do with my life, and what's my job gonna be,
right?
And I would just say, you don't have anything to worry about.
Good.
Yeah.
So if we always learn from our mistakes, why are we always so afraid to make a mistake?
If we always learn from our mistakes, why are we afraid
yeah.
to make mistakes?
Like you said before, you're a little afraid of
for sure.
Messing up.
I think this comes back to the famous Kenneth Burke quote, which is that we're the symbol using animals, and we're rotten with perfection. This idea of perfection, and in an egoic sense, of like it hurts to fall down. It hurts.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a reassessment of when we fail. We take it really personally, as like that there's a personality flaw there or something like that. And so I don't know. It's just, it doesn't feel good. And I think it's also, this comes from, so I mentioned Kenneth Burke, also from a guy that I interviewed named Saul Weinberg, a Holocaust survivor. And I think that it's hard sometimes, and life is hard, and work is hard, and uncomfortable, and we live in a society where we kind of want to be comfortable all the time, but if we are, then we turn into children and never leave our parents' houses. So it's just, it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good, but anything that's worth doing is difficult.
Yeah, and that's what makes you a better person. It helps you advance in your life and progress. Totally, I can see that. So why did toasters have the setting to burn bread to a crisp? Like, why do they have it up to a 10 if you only need a 3? Why do you think that?
Because we want it done quicker.
Yeah.
That's why.
See, yeah, more back about trying to make life easier and quicker and faster.
And you gotta have the freedom to burn your bread. I like my toast a little bit. If it only went to a 3, I don't know if I'd ever get to that where I like it to be like slightly burnt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
you're a slightly burnt kind of guy?
We need to be able to make our own mistakes, and I think we need to get the government out of the business of toasters at 3. We need to have that. That's where I believe in small government, is in toaster regulations.
Fantastic. So how do you know whether or not it's time to continue holding on or time to let go, like with your band?
It's hard to say in a general sense for me, but I think it comes from really listening to oneself and listening to the situation, and kind of quieting the chatter of one's mind and the chatter of a busy situation, and some soul searching, some focusing on what one actually wants in a situation, and then being good at going with the flow, and I take that quote that I say in class, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf, very seriously. I've known people that I've taken to the ocean who weren't raised with waves, and this is a metaphor as well, but they get in there with the waves and they get beat up and they're like almost drowning, and it's like, no, you just go with those waves. And so for me, a big part of this choices that I made in my life is I like when I don't have to make a choice, when you kind of are going in directions and doing what you can do, and then in that a bunch of doors open, and then one is obvious, like this is, App State is where I'm going to go now. I couldn't have predicted that at all, and but
it's kind of like the rip current into another area.
yeah,
Kinda.
and then you could fight it and but I liked, just kind of, let's see where this takes me, as opposed to fighting or holding on. And I know a lot of people who never left very comfortable home,
Yeah.
and you're a music guy, so I know you know Frank Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
and there's that one song on his Orange album, if you know the one I'm talking about, like it talks about, why see the world when you've got the beach? Why see the world when you have the beach? I know a lot of people who lived by that philosophy, and he's critiquing that philosophy, but they tend to be more closed off people and just kind of like lived very safely and comfortably, but that's,
Right.
that's never been, it's just boring
Yeah.
to me, so.
True. So, if there was one big lesson that people could learn from your life, what do you think that would be so far? There's still going to be more in the future, obviously, but so far, what do you think would be a good kind of learning point for some people?
This goes back to, the advice that I think this works for not just me, but I've come to realize that any advice that I give to anybody else is always, in some senses, I'm giving it to myself subconsciously. So it comes from, and so that's where this advice comes from. And it comes from my dad, who you will read about for Thursday. And, he was a very successful businessman. And what he told me is, whatever we do in our lives, we're going to have to do a lot of work. We live in a society where we work a lot no matter what you do, so do what you love to do.
Right.
And that I've been privileged to be able to live by that, and to have parents that have supported me in those endeavors of doing what I love to do. And I think that my life is a manifestation of going and of doing things that I'm privileged enough to be passionate about. And so I think that, for me, is a lesson that might resonate with other people, to first of all, figure out at deeper levels what one wants to do with one's life, and then to embrace that.
I like that a lot. That's good. So, what kind of lesson do you think we could learn from the earthworm? What kind of life lesson could we learn from the earthworm?
From the earthworm?
Yes, it can be as philosophical or out there as you want.
You mean
something about the earthworm's life and what they have to go through that would, help others in their lives. A good life lesson.
Sometimes you do shit where you eat. Because isn't the earthworm, doesn't it go both ways with the earthworm?
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I do use profanity occasionally, so hopefully hopefully that's okay. But that's just kind of a funny one. But when you say the earthworm, there's so many lessons to learn from the earthworm. Like, they create such an abundance of life. Like, they help to fertilize, the earth. They help to feed. It's the whole, web of things. And I think about aesthetically, one of my all-time favorite video games is Earthworm Jim. And like, that created a whole level of imagination that without the earthworm would not be possible.
Right, and they're just doing that without even knowing that they're, being so beneficial to everyone else.
Yeah, it became a mythic catalyst for human consciousness, that like this thing that we normally see dried up on the sidewalk can be, a space worm that, and like, I think the art of that video game is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely, I agree. So other than money, what else have you gained from your current job that you have?
I gained a level of self-awareness, and I feel so privileged to be able to and Mr. Purcell and I work in similar areas of the discipline of communication, and so he knows the same kinds of the people that I get to work with, Chris Poulos, who he has worked with as well, and this community of ethnographers of communication, aesthetic and artistic, endeavors and personal endeavors of research, and so I've gained a sense of self in relation to others, my ideas in relation to a much larger history and body of ideas of people, and so I've gained, just I'd say a voice and a context for a voice that's really, really nice. I've gained, this office and being able to live in a place that I find, beautiful and rejuvenating. I get the professorial view of the campus and a level of, I guess, social prestige or whatever that would be to be a professor, and I think most of all, I've gained, like what happened in class last week.
Definitely, yeah. That was amazing.
It seriously, it feels very valuable to be able to have a sense that what I do has an impact on students' lives, and I think of students as colleagues, and to see people who I identify with, because I remember so vividly, and I still feel like I'm still in that seat, but I remember those professors that provided me a space to learn and grow and have all this voice and stuff I'm talking about, and to feel that I can contribute in my own way to people, human beings' lives, where they say, you've helped me realize something in myself. That's awesome. Yeah. It's awesome.
Must be beautiful. Gosh. So what exactly does each present moment mean to you? So it could be the present moment that you're living in right now, or any time.
Well, it's an interesting question, and for me, I use the word mindfulness a lot, and for me, a word that I like equally well is remindfulness, to remind oneself. And so the present is always an opportunity to remind, to, no matter what's happening, if you're driving your car, if you crashed your car, if you're in an interview situation, you get kind of like lost in thinking of like, how's the footage going to be, or like, how do I need to perform in order to do a good interview. The present's always that thing that's always right there. It's that opportunity to remind oneself of where we are in our lives. And so I think that's what the present is to me, is that thing that's always there, and we can inhabit it more regularly in our lives.
Definitely. So what is, or if happiness was the natural currency, what kind of work would you want to do?
If happiness?
Yes, if you just bring happiness to people and that's how you got paid.
Oh, that's how I get paid. The professor's not far off, but if we lived in the society, I would have, like, that's like a new earth kind of a, like, I think society would be a lot different. So I think in that society, I don't know if we would have the same social structures that we currently have. Right. So I think some sort of a wandering minstrel would be, like some sort of like, trickster-esque, like
the staff and like all your rubbish and everything.
Yeah, who just gets to climb and then like play the bass and you like say weird things to people.
Be a wizard, astronaut, doctor.
Yeah. Some sort of wandering minstrel wizard type person.
Rock and roll wizard. I like it.
Yeah, that would be sweet.
So what is one thing that you want your students to take with them after having a class with you? Even if they don't learn anything in the class itself.
Yeah. I want them to, and I say this a lot, but I'm much less interested in teaching people what I think I know than I am in trying to collaborate with or be a catalyst for somebody's own passions and inspirations that they have. So I hope that they take a sense of like a heartening. I hope that they feel heartened in their own existence and life and capacities and potentials for growth, and so that they themselves can go off in the myriad directions that they will go in their lives. Like, I am excited for talented students like you who have so much going on and are willing to beatbox in a class spontaneously. I hope that you just take like an encouragement for that excitement in your own life and one's own life to go off and make that happen.
I've definitely felt that this semester for sure. I definitely have.
Sweet.
I'll tell you that. So good job.
Sweet.
You're doing it right.
Thank you.
So if all the world's a stage, where does the audience sit?
It's a stage like if you've seen Synecdoche, New York. Have you seen that movie?
No, I have not actually.
It's a Charlie Kaufman movie. It was one of Philip Seymour Hoffman. That's the guy who just died, right? No, yeah.
Yeah, Seymour Hoffman died.
Yeah. It was one of his later movies, and it's an amazing movie. I think we are all spect-actors. So instead of spectators, we're both spectators and actors. So I think the audience, we are each other's audience while we are performing for each other. So I think it's this collaborative spect-actor, and I steal that from Augusto Boal, who steals it from Paulo Freire.
So is any idea original, do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think every idea is original. And actually, this is something we're going to be reading for Tuesday is Michel Desserteau's Reading as Poaching. So in different senses. So it's often said that there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
Every idea has been thought of before. And I think in some senses, sure, I guess that makes some sense. But for me, the questions that we're talking about right now, the processes of our interpretation in our everyday life, it is all new. It's all being recycled over and again. And in the act of a recycling of an idea, of putting together two ideas that previously hadn't been married, I think that's the creative spark. And one example for that is jazz musicians. Jazz for me is one of the best expressive forms of Western music, or like purely creative form. What you'll notice in jazz songs, when they're soloing, they'll be referencing a whole bunch of weird stuff that you've heard before, but they're in that context, in that moment, it is new and it is alive and it is fresh. So it's not that it's pulled out of the ether from nowhere. It's this recycling and sort of
remixing of all different things,
decoupage and combination of things, and that's where all of a sudden you're like, Mary Had a Little Lamb? Where did that come from? But that was
Mary Had
that was and then he's back into
some little jive.
Yeah.
So for the future, what is one of your biggest fears? Not only for yourself, but for